Hello everyone, I'm Captain Logan, and welcome back to the insidious but tragic Comic Vault. Today, I've been asked by Bag Studios to take a look at a book that I read the first issue of years ago when it first came out, was not especially impressed with, and really kind of disliked, and never looked at it again. And now that I have been kind of coerced into reading it again and going a little bit farther with it, I have to say I am a little bit turned around on this. I have changed my tune on this. This is the first 6 issues, the first trade of Charles Soule's Darth Vader, not to be confused with the Darth Vader series that went in conjunction with Jason Aaron's Star Wars when Marvel first got the license back for Star Wars. That book was written by Kieran Gillen and was set between A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back. This is set immediately after Revenge of the Sith and is a period of time that, at least in new Star Wars EU, we've not seen for Darth Vader yet, and is wet behind the ears, just became a Sith, is still finding his way between being Anakin Skywalker and being Darth Vader, and a really, awkward kind of period to try to deal with Darth Vader because of the convoluted and kind of weird way that Anakin Skywalker is in Revenge of the Sith, coerced into becoming Darth Vader, tricked into it by the Emperor, not seduced by the dark side in the way you would have expected, but rather kind of just, played for a fool. And, of course, Anakin Skywalker in those movies, not a character that I really cared for and really saw as a, fully fleshed out, real person. Had a lot of issues, of course, with Anakin in those movies, and a lot of EU stuff has attempted to flesh that stuff out more and find a way to make those movies better, if that's at all possible, like kind of reinterpreting certain scenes in those movies in such a way where they can tell stories that are a little bit more sophisticated and with more character dimension, and make these characters come alive and make sense and make the world make more sense in a way that it didn't in the prequels. That's always a struggle. It's always kind of weird, and this is no exception to that. Charles Soule. And I should mention, by the way, the artist here is Giuseppe Camuncoli, and a really different kind of art style than we had with the previous book. This is a little bit, I don't want to say sketchier, but it's a little bit more cartoony. I mean, it's serious, but it's got more of like a serious animated series vibe. And anyway, so right away we are reinterpreting that last scene in Revenge of the Sith when Vader says no, and it's completely different. He has some of the same dialogue, but the approach and the tone of it is entirely different and easier to take more seriously, and is kind of a reinterpretation that you can't possibly get from looking at that scene. But in translating it to comics, all of a sudden Anakin Skywalker has turned into something closer to what we think of as Darth Vader in the original movies, and he is like not melodramatic, and I guess you just have to imagine that Anakin Skywalker was kind of a different guy, which won't be difficult for fans of Clone Wars, because he is kind of a different character in that. And so the Anakin Skywalker that you've spent the most time with, if you're a big Star Wars fan and you've looked at a lot of extended universe stuff, is not the guy that we kind of were just introduced to in the movies, that we actually, flesh out and make more likable, arguably, in a lot of other things. Anyway, so right away, he's, instead of going no, it's a lot more subtle, and he says no several times, and he, goes after the Emperor for a second, so it's like an escalation. It's like, no, 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 and then it's not, there's no exclamation point, it's not melodramatic, it's just no, like definitive. and he gets overbearing, and he does not like his lot now, and that he is, lost Padme, and that he's been transformed into this. And of course he hates the Emperor, and that sets up his eventually, trying to take over the Empire from the Emperor, and then dethroning him and killing him, and finally fulfilling the prophecy and everything when you get to Return of the Jedi. And so this fits a lot better, of course, with good Star Wars, with the original trilogy. And I like how that scene plays a lot, and I kind of wish, of course, that that's how it had been done in the movie in the first place. So you have to just reimagine that movie and, ignore the way it actually played, where he's still kind of a whiny simpleton and is just wearing a Darth Vader costume, and it's silly and it's laughable, and it's really hard not to crack up during what is supposed to be the saddest and most tragic scene. Charles Soule turns it into an actual tragic scene. I read this differently the first time I read it. I'm still back and forth on the way this deals with the Kyber crystals, and I'll talk about that in a second, but initially I thought this read too much in line with the prequels, where it was like, if you can't beat them, join them, and I'm just gonna be as over the top and silly and insane as the prequels were, and that's just the material I'm stuck with, so that's the standard that I should be judged by. And upon this reading, for whatever reason, it didn't read as much that way, and I think I was turned off by the art initially, which I've really come around on also, and it fits this material really well. But I also thought the Kyber crystal thing was kind of silly and seemed like a thing that Lucas would have done in the prequels, where we need an explanation for something that I don't think requires any explanation. So Vader's first mission is go get a lightsaber from a former Jedi, because you have to corrupt a Kyber crystal in order to make it red. So the Kyber crystals are alive, which is actually played with in a really cool and interesting and nice way in issue 5, which I'll talk about. But the reason the lightsabers are red, the Sith sabers are red, is because the Kyber crystal is in constant agony, and that's supposed to symbolize the rage of the Sith, where they're very sored. Their lightsaber is constantly in agony and pain because of their anger and rage, and they're submitting to the intense emotion of the dark side. And I guess that's kind of a fun idea. I just don't feel like you need an explanation for why the saber is red, especially because there aren't just two colors. That makes me go, okay, how come some lightsabers are green and some are blue and some are purple? Are they like mood sabers? Do the Kyber crystals like latch onto the person that's wielding it, and then it's a different color depending on what they're like? And I'm sure there is some explanation, if not in the new expanded universe, the old one. I don't know. I'm a very casual Star Wars fan, as I always say, and these are things that I'm just not familiar with yet. So I'm sure somebody in the comments can tell me. And I have heard that different colors are supposed to symbolize different things with Jedi. Purple is something I forget now. I don't know if that's just symbolic and thematic, or if that's an in-universe thing, but I also thought it was kind of silly initially, because I didn't understand why the Emperor wouldn't just tell Vader to get, or Anakin, I guess, before he's Vader, to get one of the lightsabers when they're killing all the Jedi. Like, why are we waiting until now? Why didn't he say, if you get in a big fight with Obi-Wan Kenobi, steal his lightsaber at the end? Of course, he wouldn't have been able to do that because he lost that fight, but I don't know why, when he was, initiating Order 66, and he was out there with some of the clone troopers, I don't know why he didn't just get one of the sabers when he was out there. And if memory serves, he did actually kill some Jedi himself. I thought the idea, I mean, initially, back before we got that movie, I thought the idea was that he single-handedly killed the Jedi himself. And I don't know how much sense that would have made, but that was the and also, I didn't have a sense back then how many Jedi there were. Like, apparently there were like hundreds of them, and the majority of them are dead now, but of course there are some that are still in hiding, and we meet one of those here, and that's who Vader steals his lightsaber from. So we get to see what the initial lightsaber looked like before Vader got his hands on it, and it's handled as well as it can be with this premise. I'm still a little bit on the fence about how I feel about that, but this time around I was more won over, especially as Vader is dealing with this Jedi in hiding, which is a section I like quite a bit. So he goes to this moon where there is kind of an exiled Jedi, and I'm fuzzy on, I think the book is kind of vague on what exactly it is he did, what his transgressions were that got him sent to this moon, but he's not allowed to be around the Jedi anymore, and he's kind of off just meditating, and someday he will return when his penance is paid, and all of the Jedi are killed, or the majority of them are, and he feels that happen, and he knows that it's happened, but he still is not allowed to leave. I guess for his own personal code, he doesn't think that he's paid his penance yet, and he doesn't leave, and Vader shows up and tries to take his lightsaber, and there's a really thrilling cinematic fight. Of course, these books, all of the Marvel Star Wars books, for the most part, have a lot of really good visual storytelling. They feel like you're watching a movie while you're reading them. This is no different. It feels like an event, and it is a very fast read. These are 6 issues. It took me maybe half an hour, 40 minutes to read this. It's really easy to breeze through it and kind of miss certain bits of action because you have to kind of slow yourself down to appreciate some of the silent panels. And there are a lot of silent panels. This is also not a very wordy book because Vader famously is not speaking a whole lot. And I like, by the way, that even right after he turns into Vader, he's not like Anakin and talking constantly. It makes a lot of sense that he would kind of immediately go to, I'm not doing that anymore. Where like he's really solemn, he's lost his whole world, his emotional center and foundation is gone now, and this is a Vader who has not fully found himself yet, but a lot of the foundation is laid already. This is a really extreme, broken version of Anakin Skywalker. So, of course, this guy should not, immediately tap into compassion. Like, occasionally he's gonna find that, and we'll see some of that in Kieran Gillen's book. But right away, out of the womb, so to speak, he is really doubling down on being merciless and relentless and totally cold. And that's the way he treats this Jedi named Kirak, which sounds really close to Kirok, which is what Kirk calls himself when he gets amnesia in a TOS episode called the Paradise Syndrome. And it's funny because he also has a droid named Erix, who is a character from Star Trek the Animated Series. And I'm sure none of that is intentional, but I couldn't stop thinking about Star Trek during that section. So anyway, he puts him through, this Kirak guy puts Vader through kind of a trial for a second going up this mountain where he has to fight some giant birds, which is just an awesome fight sequence. That's one of my favorite parts. It's just he's fighting these huge birds. This is the last thing you expect to see Vader doing. And then he tells the droid to stop sending traps at it, to stop initiating the traps, so that he gets up to the top and won't expect Kirak to just basically toss him over the mountain, which is a really great cliffhanger. And this book, and I think a lot of the Marvel books do this well, but especially this one, getting us back to kind of the basic roots of Star Wars, a lot like The Mandalorian does. This, in places, has some of those kind of samurai and Western overtones. and it also feels like a traditional serial where, Vader is falling to his doom. What's going to happen? You got to wait a month to find out. I think this binge is fine. I think it reads well as a piece, going from, chapter to chapter, getting those cliffhangers, but I also think this probably read really well month to month, and I wish I had kept going with it. I found myself by the end of this really curious to see what happens next and wanting to read on, and I probably will, if not for review, just for myself, because I'm curious now. So, I've done a complete 180 on this. So he gets knocked off the mountain, and Kirak thinks that he's beaten him, and Vader's in really bad shape, but of course he survives. And one thing I wondered was why Kirak didn't immediately recognize that he was alive and sense him in the Force, because I never know how far that range goes, and maybe it depends on the Jedi, but of course a lot of Force rules are really arbitrary and kind of vague, and I guess, like I said, the explanation is probably just different Jedi are at different levels of that, which just seems kind of easy and convenient to me. It's kind of more just so that we can have this dramatic moment when Vader shows up and Kirak's not expecting him to, just as he's coming upon him, go, oh, I sense him in the Force. So, we've not forgotten that that's a thing that Jedi do, but I wouldn't think that he would have to get that near to him. Sometimes Vader... And maybe it's because he's Vader and he's supposed to be, the super powerful Jedi, but, Vader can tell when another Jedi, and especially if it's Luke Skywalker, is in the general vicinity out in space. And here, he's in a mountain that's very close to this hangar bay where he's at trying to get a ship so he can get off the planet, because now he's able to leave. And he doesn't sense Vader until he's, right on top of him. And that was the thing I wondered. I'm glad he finally sensed him with the Force. They didn't have to just go out there and see him, oh, you're alive. But that seemed kind of easy to me, just so that Vader could sneak up on him and then kill him. But we get a great fight there. I don't know what it is that Vader's fighting him with, because he doesn't have a lightsaber, but he's got this... purple energy blade thing that might as well be a lightsaber, and he bests a Jedi wielding a lightsaber with it. And again, I get that Vader is supremely powerful in the Force, but if a powerful Force user is able to just use some other thing that's not a lightsaber, I don't really know what the point of the lightsabers is, and I still find myself very fuzzy on that. I don't know why, I get that it's traditional, but other than that, I don't know what is so special about a lightsaber versus any other weapon, really, that a Jedi could wield, because they don't do anything special with the Force in using it. You don't have to have the Force in order to turn on and use a lightsaber, and we see that in the new trilogy with Finn, where he's not a Force user, but at first we thought maybe he was, but it doesn't seem like he is in the next two movies, so he's wielding a lightsaber, and he's able to do that. I don't really know why only Jedi are using lightsabers and why that's the traditional weapon of the Jedi, besides the fact that they're supposed to be knights and knights had swords. But anyway, I digress. That's not really a problem with this book. That's just Star Wars and a thing I don't quite get. But the only issue here is, again, he's got a thing that I don't think is a lightsaber, and he's besting a Jedi with it. So he steals that lightsaber. He goes back to the Emperor. Well, actually, before he goes to the Emperor, we have this great issue, and this is my favorite issue, and I think it's really powerfully done, and it's really sad, where this is a kind of textbook character who refuses to change. This kind of cautionary tale, what not to do if the anti-hero thing, or I should say not a hero, where Vader pulls out the Kyber crystal, and before he tortures it and uses it to make his blade red, and this is the big thing that's turning me more around on that idea, the Kyber crystal speaks to him and shows him what the future could be if he made the right choice, if he went the light path, and he did the hard thing, and he didn't let his emotions consume him. and it shows him that, and I don't know if it's just like one plausible future or if it's just trying to convince him, because I overthought this. I had this whole question of is the Kyber crystal trying to save itself? Like, is it self-aware? And, or even if it's not, is it just instinct? Like, is this just survival instinct getting telepathically into Vader's head to try to show him a better path for himself, so that maybe it won't turn the Kyber crystal red and torture it forever? But anyway, so I don't know if he's seeing the what his light side destiny would be, or if it's just a vision of a better path, but this isn't really how it might have gone down. But anyway, he goes to, and for a second you think this is what's really happening, and then you realize it can't possibly be. He goes to the Emperor, he goes to Palpatine, and of course this is, just to set up context, the very beginning of the Empire, when a lot of people think that we're at peace now, and what the Emperor has done is a good thing, and the good guys have won. But of course it turns out that that is not the case, and we're in for decades of misery. And so he goes to the Emperor in this vision, and he is about to show him his lightsaber, but it's green. And Palpatine says, "Oh, you've made your choice, and you've made a poor one." And then they fight, and he kills the Emperor. And then he goes to Obi-Wan, and it's very clear that if he went to Obi-Wan, there is a chance that he would accept him again, and that he could right some of his wrongs, and that his life is not unsalvageable, even though he is more machine than man now. And of course, that's not the path that he takes, and he decides that he doesn't discuss it. We don't get into his head about this. We're very, and I'm really glad, by the way, that there's not narration boxes that are constantly getting in Vader's head. This is one of those rare places where I think it is fine that we have a wall up between us and our protagonist, because this is such a private guy, and also not a difficult character's motivations to understand. I don't think I actually really need to get in Vader's head as far as, maybe I would in a novel, but in a comic book, and it's not like he can emote through the helmet, but I feel like I can always get a really good sense of what he's thinking and what he's doing without having to actually read his thoughts. And I don't think in this particular case that that's necessary, and I think it would be a detriment to the book. I don't believe we did that much in the previous book either. I can't remember. Maybe there were some narration boxes in that. This is not using that, and I'm fine with that. Again, it works in the same way Mandalorian does, where all he has to do is give you kind of a head nod, and you can tell what he's thinking. And this has that even just in comic panels. And so the sense I get is that Vader decides that he is too far gone, and he has destroyed that former life, and if he doesn't have Padme and he doesn't have the Jedi, there's no reason to, like he just doesn't have anything left to live for. And he's kind of fooling himself, because that vision gives you the sense that he actually could have a life past that, and look like Darth Vader, but be as like it would be a road to redemption thing, but he could maybe be sort of a hero now. And he's made his bed, and it's almost like he's torturing himself because of what he's done to his friends and to Padme and everything by continuing to be Vader. Like he says at the beginning of the book, or not the beginning, but someone says you're a monster, and he says I am. Like he agrees with that, and he has embraced that he's a monster. He's just a dark force of nature now, and he could go against that, but he's embraced that he's not going to. And then the last issue is kind of filling in some gaps for some other mythology we get in a different series, which is Star Wars Rebels, setting up the Inquisitor Guild. or the Inquisitorium, which I always thought was kind of a funny word. So the Inquisitors are basically dark Jedi who aren't Sith, which is how you get around the rule of two, and I think it's kind of an easy way around it. But you have former Jedi who work for the Emperor, but they're not actually his apprentices. They're just his minions. That seems like an easy loophole to me, but the Emperor can make up whatever rules he wants to. He's the Emperor, so I guess like he probably knows he's cheating, but that's fine with him. And Vader is in charge of the Inquisitorium, and that's how it is in Rebels also. We see the start of that, and so he fights the lead Inquisitor, who is the big bad guy for the first season of Rebels, and I always thought he had a really cool design, and he's got that lightsaber with the wheel in the middle of it, and he doesn't realize that Vader is the Emperor's apprentice at first, and then they fight. And he's like, "How come I had to fight him, Emperor Palpatine? He could have killed me." And it turns out that it's really just for Vader's benefit, to almost like bolster Vader's confidence, because both of them are like, well, what if the other one had killed me? And the Emperor to the Inquisitor is basically like, well, your life is not your own, and if he killed you, that's for my benefit. And with Vader, he's like, but was there any chance you would have lost? And he says no. And so I guess he's trying to like bolster Vader's confidence and say there's a reason that you're the apprentice and these guys aren't. And so we're getting the Inquisitor thing all started in that issue and playing around with that mythology, which looks kind of interesting and like it might be fun to read about moving forward. So a lot of this is set up, but I think Soule has a really good sense of Vader's personality and what he's all about, and in as elegant a way as possible, he's getting away from the tone of the prequels and working with kind of the basic beats and the plot points of those movies, but kind of changing the spirit of a little bit, which again, I think you kind of have to do to make it match with anything later, and to make me care at all about this character. I think this is actually really quite good. It had a first issue that turned me off initially. Getting all of it, or at least all of that first trade, the first 6 issues, and then reading it again, it's pretty good. Again, I don't know how I feel about that Kyber crystal thing, but it's minor. It works really well for the rest of this story, and it's thrilling. So I like it a lot, and thanks to Bag Studios for making me give it another shot. I'm going to get back to Legacy soon, which I'm really excited about. I love Legacy. I want to call it my favorite Star Wars thing, but I've not read all of it yet. I have read the first trade and a half. I reviewed that quite a while back, months ago now, might have even been a couple of years at this point, and maybe a year and a half, and so I may go ahead and do a quick video on the first trade again, just to get my bearings on it, and then come back with more after that. That was requested recently by Ian, and I owe him a couple of back videos, and that's what he chose, so I'm going to be getting back to that soon. I don't know how much of that I'm going to review, but I'll do at least a couple trades, if not more. And anyway, thanks a bunch for watching, everybody. Hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you again soon with more videos. I'm Captain Logan, and